Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Community Exchange podcast. I am Matthew Scott Goldstein, better known as MSG in the industry. On this podcast, I'm talking to the visionaries building the media ecosystems of the future. Together, we cover the challenges, the opportunities, and what's next for our industry. As always, the Community Exchange podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, the company building a safer, fairer, and more trustworthy internet. Now, we have a great conversation for you. Larry Allen is Vice President and GM of Data at Addressable Enablement for Comcast Advertising, that big company in Philadelphia. In his role, he's responsible for leading the overarching data monetization efforts across Comcast. In addition, Larry leads many cross-industry collaboration efforts. We'll get into more of that later. Larry previously served as Vice President of Ad Strategy at Warner Media. Larry also is Senior VP of Business Development at Xaxis Group M, a small little company. In addition, Larry held positions at AOL, Tacoda, we're going to start that whole thing, YieldX, Viewpoint, 24/7 Real Media. Now, Larry, before we talk about Comcast and the state of the industry, let's reminisce for some time about Tacoda.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Tacoda, we got to start with the first story. This is May, June 2006, 18 years ago.
Yes.
I was working at Viacom. I was running revenue operations for MTV Networks, MTV and Nickelodeon VH1, and something popped on my calendar, and there was a meeting that you and Kurt Vibrandt, who was the CEO of Tacoda, had with me and 21 other people at Viacom.
Yeah.
I remember some big-ass conference room. Tell me your version of that story.
I vividly remember it as well. I was running business development and marketing for Tacoda at the time. My role there was really to build the publisher network.
And by the way, you were really good at it.
Yeah, thank you.
No, you were amazingly good at that, Larry. I was like, that's like your superpower.
Well, I had built two before, so that helped, right? So you build some contacts in the media industry, and then you call your friends and convince them that what you're doing is really interesting. And we were building the first audience company, right? It was the beginning of audience targeting. And Viacom was like a major prospect that we wanted to bring into the network. And this was when Viacom was
big, unlike what it is today, a little smaller.
Right. So we needed the traffic, frankly, and we thought we could actually add a lot of value for Viacom too. So anyway, put together this giant meeting. I think Wade probably helped organize, get a lot of people in the room. Wade Davis was the CFO
of Viacom corporate parent, who I did not know at all.
Yeah, so I think he helped. This is again where who you know kind of matters, and helped put that meeting together. And you were there, and we gave the Tacoda pitch.
It was you and Kurt Vibrandt giving the pitch, and there was 20 people in a room, and I'm like, I've never seen this many people inside the company ever in a meeting.
Which is it's kind of crazy that happens. I know often, and I think when we were at AOL even, we would go to meetings and we would introduce other people within the company to each other.
Well, that's what happened at the Viacom meeting, right? Same thing.
So, we had that meeting, and you were, I think, mesmerized with what we were doing. And
I remember. You mean I can actually target someone who was an auto intender on Cars.com on an MTV or Nickelodeon property, and I get a big CPM, and I'm like, how the hell do you do that? It was remarkable, the infrastructure technology that Tacoda built 20 years ago that you were then communicating to all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the meeting, 21 people. I remember that. And then what happened when we left? Because you guys were down the street, and you and Kurt went back to Tacoda World, and you said...
Yeah, I was like, look, I think we need to hire this guy.
Which was me.
That was, yes.
And that was before I was MSG.
That's right.
I became MSG at Tacoda.
You were still Matthew Goldstein. And we were desperately in need of somebody who could analyze how we were doing from a demand perspective and actually optimize campaigns. We had good operational people that kind of knew how to book campaigns. We had some great
people there.
But I think what we needed was somebody who could actually come in and architect the whole thing, and
as I say, keep the trains running on time.
And yeah, so I fortuitously I feel like you called me after the meeting, and I was like,
I think I did.
Yeah, and I was like, I think we might have an opportunity for you because we're looking for an ops person to really run this ship, and then you came. Got the job.
Well, I remember the next day or a week afterward, I met with Kurt Vibrandt for the first time. He took me to Virgil's right across the street.
Yep.
And I think he pretty much offered me the job. I don't remember what else happened. I just know I took the job. And this was June 2006, sort of 18 years ago.
Yeah, and it took us 15 months, 14 months from then to sell the business to AOL?
Yeah, we have a couple stories first, though. Okay, so here's
miraculous.
a story that I've never told before, and I'm going to tell everyone right now. June 2006 at Viacom, I was running revenue operations. And I believe a week or two after I left, this woman took over running digital ad sales. Her name was Nada. And she was there, I believe, for 3 years or so. And then after she got there, I left, I think, a week or two before she got there. After she got there, she brought in Brad Herman, who worked at AOL with her previously. And I believe that if I would have stayed at Viacom and not go to work at Tacoda, I might have been fired by my job 3 or 4 weeks before I left and took that job. I'm not sure about this, but I think that could have happened. I was there for 16 years.
It's very typical, right?
So
a new leader comes in and they bring their people. They want comfort. I mean, it happened to me at AOL. So,
but we were talking. It doesn't matter how good you are, how smart you are. There's something about timing, and the timing of when you and Kurt came to that meeting at Viacom in May 2006. Literally changed my life. Like, you and Kurt helped to change my life on the trajectory it is today. Now, when I got to Tacoda, I did everything. I remember hunkering down for 3 or 4 weeks, not talking to anyone, trying to figure stuff out. But it was just a remarkable place. It was literally lightning in a bottle that we've never seen anywhere else.
It's really rare to get a team that can work that well together, debate harshly, but then come out the other side with an agreement. Whether you won or lost the debate, you agreed, and then that's what you were going to execute on. And I think that was the thing that made that management team so special, was that we all came with an opinion. We hammered on it until we got the right outcome, and then we all just got in line and we went for it and pushed hard. And that's why we were able to kind of grow that business as fast as we did.
And one of my favorite stories I always tell about Tacoda is, I remember this email would come out on a Friday afternoon, and you and I were always bickering in the beginning, right? But in a love bickering way, making each other better. I remember an email would come out on Friday, and by the time we got to work on Monday, there was enough of us happening over the weekend, we would solve that problem by the time we walked in the office on Monday, which rarely happens today either.
No. Well, I think we all wanted to make the business better. We were all invested in the business, and it was the right size where, it was still, the people were malleable. Like, it wasn't a giant team. It's not like trying to turn a battleship.
There was 100 people.
Yeah. So it was big enough that we could we made a material difference, but it wasn't so hard that we couldn't solve those problems quickly.
Yeah. And the story I always tell is when I got there in June 2006, it was $1 million in revenue. When we sold to AOL in October, November 2007, we were doing $8 to $9 million a month in revenue. And my job was making sure the trains ran on time, and we figured that stuff out.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
And fortunately, we had enough inventory.
Yes. Your job. Okay, so there's a soda store you need to tell now?
Oh, man.
Come on.
Yeah. So I was an avid Coca-Cola drinker. Like,
addicted.
Morning, noon, night. Like, it didn't matter. It was Coca-Cola during the day, Jack and Cokes at night, right? Like that, it was my lifeblood, I think. We're in a meeting. I'm in a conference room waiting for a meeting, and I have a Coca-Cola sitting on the table. It's maybe a quarter of the way finished, and you pick up the bottle and you whip it into the trash can.
And by the way, I have no recollection of this at all.
And you say, "You don't need this crap. It's bad for you. Drink water." And
I said water, probably.
Probably. But literally that was so shocking to me that somebody would like invade my space and like just rip something out of my hand and be so direct, but in a thoughtful, kind way, that it was jarring. And I won't say I haven't had Coca-Cola since, because I have. However, it broke that addiction to Coca-Cola, and now I drink seltzer water like it's going out of style.
Yeah. And then what's the other? You gave me other advice after I left Tacoda. What was that?
Yeah.
That again changed my life.
So I was, this was quite a bit later,
Yep.
I would say, because I had already gone through a stint consulting, and I had an interesting experience with a lot of cool startups. And I think you were venturing out on your own.
Well, this was after I left. I went to Pier 39.
Yeah. And then you left and you said, I'm going to start my own consulting.
Can I tell another story that I've never told pretty much anyone before?
You're interrupting my story.
I know.
Sure, go ahead.
At Pier 39, I was there a year and a half, Israeli-based company doing semantic advertising. And at the end of my time at Tacoda, I was actually fired. I don't think I've told that to too many people. I did not leave on my own. I was fired.
Well,
it happens.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was asked to leave too because our boss, Kurt Vriebrands, was fired. All right. And then the new person who came in said, oh, I want my person running business development. Right. So it happens. Yeah. I mean, just like you're not a story, the same thing.
But again, this is timing also. And then I started interviewing for jobs. And as I interviewed for jobs, they weren't great. And I sort of said, do you want to hire me to consult? And before you know it, I had 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs consulting. A lot of ex-Tacoda people bringing me in saying, can you do what you did at Tacoda over here at my new company? And then you gave me some profound advice, which was?
Well, I said, always say yes, but never say no.
Right.
I'm probably never say no.
I think it was never say no.
Yeah. And because then you have options, right? It's like you never know when the next job is going to come. And so stack them up, work a little bit harder, build the business, build the experience, and then you'll have a reputation that everyone needs you. And look, here you are 18 years later, still consulting, and you probably can say no now.
I do say no sometimes now,
but you have the experience and integrity, and people know you. You're a brand, which I think makes all the difference in the world.
And then the other thing, at Tacoda, I was running RevOps and Matt Arkin was running sales. So you couldn't have a Matt and a Matt running sales and RevOps. And that's where I think I became MSG.
I think so.
And again, all this happened when I was 40 years old plus. Like all my success, knock on wood, was, 40 plus. It wasn't in the early ages.
I mean, look, it's rare that you're like uber successful in your early 30s. I mean, you're building your career, you're gaining experience. Failing, I think, a lot at that time, but that is how you learn, right? I mean, we tell our kids that, but, it's true. When you think back to some of those pivotal moments in your career, it's like those big mistakes that you made or the ones that you recovered from kind of define who you are and then enable you not to make those mistakes again, hopefully, right? You see things like wisdom, right? When you're in a meeting and you kind of can see around the corner and everybody else is like, well, how do you know that? And you're like, well, because of X, Y, and Z situations that I've dealt with before. And it's just
so for those listening right now, I'm getting teary-eyed just being here with Al and Larry reminiscing on this. Let's move on to something else before I get too emotional. Yeah. Okay, so that was 16 years ago. Anything you want to talk about? Or you want to jump right into where you are now and talk about the state of the world inside of Comcast and CTV world?
I mean, look, it's up to you. It's your show.
Okay, let's talk about CTV world and what's happening now. So when we were in the south of France, first time I ever went, you said something very profound to me about Amazon and what they did with Amazon ads on the TV on Prime. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we're obviously in a giant transition with consumers moving to streaming lightning fast. We just saw with the Olympics, more consumption of streaming content than ever, leaving linear sort of behind. I don't think linear as a art will go away.
And linear is
live TV, right? It's not appointment viewing in a way.
It's the old cable package, basically, right?
Yeah, but it's now manifesting itself in what they call fast, right? Which is where you turn on a channel and there's something playing. You don't pick what to watch. There's just something there. So what's interesting about Amazon is that they have all these Prime subscribers and they were already offering. Do you know the number video. About? 122 million Prime subscribers, I think, in the U.S. It's a big number,
huge number.
And what they did, smartly, was they said, "Hey, everybody who has Prime is now going to have advertising." So they went from a SVOD service to an AVOD service overnight, completely. Now they don't thread, ads into pods the same way you see on TV, but there's a pre-roll. They do some interruption, and they're slowly, using
And
AI to determine like where they should put the ads. Like this is where technology now is pretty cool because you can use AI, review a TV show, a 30-minute show or a 22-minute show, and decide when to put the ads in. And they don't have to be a full pod. It could be 2 30-second spots or 2 15s. You can be a little more creative in streaming because you're not bound by the clock.
And it feels like it's about 3 minutes an hour about for Amazon now. So it's not horrible. It's a little annoying, but you can deal with it. It's not like watching the Olympics where you got...
we did... so I was at Turner for a while, and we did a lot of consumer research. And, the current... 14 minutes an hour, 16 minutes an hour is overwhelming for consumers. There's clearly backlash. And the initial move to streaming was, hey, we're going to lower the ad load because that'll make TV better for consumers, and they'll likely engage more. There'll be higher conversion. There'll be better brand loyalty. All this stuff that makes TV great, but do it in a way that's a little more responsible. And so this is where I think Amazon has a huge advantage. They have a big content library, and they don't have to put a lot of ads right now because they already are making the money on the subscription. It's like baked into their cost model, and now every ad that they run is EBITDA positive, right? It's just net incremental revenue for them, which is part of the reason why we're seeing their ad numbers just go so fast. And they have a huge consumer base.
And what happened with Netflix, who was supposed to be the leader in advertising and
so it's
literally Mike Tyson punch in the face, right?
Yeah, Netflix is still the largest, streaming service, and they get the lion's share of viewing in streaming, but they introduced an ad tier at a lower price point from a subscription fee standpoint. And what that did was, now if it's a $5 discount off of their premium tier, they lowered it. People sign up, they could downgrade to that ad tier. Now all of the advertising they run, they have to make up that spread in order to get back to net neutral, which is different. Amazon said, oh, we charge people $100 a month or $100 a year for Prime. Now we're just going to add advertising to everybody. You don't have a choice.
And no one saw that coming, right?
No, nobody saw it coming. And that is like these strategic decisions that companies make that make all the difference in the world, because now, Amazon has complete control over pricing. They could do anything they want, and they could charge 50 cents and it's still positive to their business. Forget about like ad cost, sales costs and things like that. But like just from a pure revenue perspective, it's all accretive. With Netflix, they have a big number they got at the beginning of every month that they got to cover in advertising in order to make up that sub loss, the sub fee loss.
And what were the CPMs in the marketplace of what Netflix was trying to sell at and Amazon came in at?
Before, so this is probably 8 to 12 months prior to Amazon turning on advertising. I would say the average connected TV CPMs were $35 to $40.
That was Netflix.
And then the high end, some of the more premium programming was $45, $50, like crazy CPMs. And now they're in the mid to high teens
because of Amazon.
Primarily Amazon, and also the OEMs, all the TV manufacturers, they have introduced fast channels, and so they're driving a lot of viewership. Think of fast like cable, right? Like all those long tail cable networks that people tune into and they watch random shows. That's what fast is for people because it's free. You turn your TV on, you go to one of those fast channels, and then you see some ads, and the TV manufacturers are generating a lot of views.
Any sense of how many of the 120 million Amazon subscribers actually said, take the ads away from me for $2.99 a month?
I don't know that number, but I do know that only about 25% of them are watching every month.
Okay.
So they still have a ways to go to catch up.
25. So like 30 of the 120 million are watching Prime Video.
Correct.
Okay.
And so, and how much is the other thing, right? This is the interesting thing about TV. Like you could have a huge install base or subscriber base, but if they're not actually tuning in and watching for a long period of time every day, then, the viewership numbers are pretty low. Or the viewing time is low, therefore the number of ads is low. So these are some of the interesting mechanics that you have to look for, because someone like Hulu, they have longer watch time. People watch every day. And so, they're cranking through a lot more ad impressions on a monthly basis than Amazon is right now.
Okay, so we're taping this on Tuesday, August 13th. The Olympics just ended. What was your take on the Olympics? Were you watching it? I mean, this is also the Comcast world, and it feels like NBC and Comcast did a phenomenal job this year with the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pride of the company. I mean, it's within NBC Sports, and the whole company does come together because there's a whole technology arm within Comcast that partners with NBC team to deliver amazing kind of sports experiences. But I think this year they knocked it out of the park, and the usage of the Peacock streaming service from a user kind of engagement standpoint, you could log onto the app, pick any sport you wanted, even the weird sports that never get any airtime. Everything is videotaped. It always has been. It's just it didn't have an outlet, right? And so maybe that got into some highlights, but now you could delve deep into a sport that otherwise you would have either not known it was on because it was on some long tail cable channel, or they just didn't air it or they only aired it for a very short period of time. So now you could go in and watch anything and anytime. Last night I rewatched the men's final because it was just the last 10 minutes were so good.
The basketball final.
Yeah, it was so good. And so
Steph Curry's pretty phenomenal.
Unbelievable. And that's just amazing. That now you can actually take something that was 2 weeks of time and you can stretch it out even. Like there's going to be continued watching for the next couple weeks because there's so much content that's produced in that short period of time. And then just some of the video work where they would multiple camera angles immediately like synchronized and then show you different views of Steph Curry putting the ball in the basket. Unbelievable. The 360, kind of view.
I consumed the Olympics on YouTube TV and I thought it was a remarkably good experience. Just everything there. There were so many different options to look at. I just consumed more than I thought I was going to.
The YouTube TV, the cable package.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were probably multi-viewing, multiple.
Multi-viewing was great.
Yeah, multiple NBC channels.
Yeah, you get the screen with the 4 like you do with the NFL, and it was like, okay, which one do you want to watch? Again, the one thing that was annoying was the 8 or 10 minutes of ads over and over and over. But I guess you have to pay for it somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very expensive proposition when you think about the amount of just video production that's happening on site across all those different sporting facilities.
Okay, let's move a little bit to the data. So what data is there now in the CTV world more so than there's ever been before?
Well,
and simplified if you can.
Yeah, so there's more data available that brands are generating because many of the advertisers are focused on direct-to-consumer engagement more than they ever had been before.
In certain categories, right?
Well, even something as crazy as CPG, they're trying to figure out how do they learn about customers' buying behaviors and get that information. Sometimes they're partnering with a Kroger or somebody to capture that information. But many brands across many categories are building these customer lists, which makes sense. Like, when do they buy? I want their name and address on file. I want to be able to communicate with them via email or remarketing through advertising. And so all of that data can now be modeled and, evaluated so they can build profiles on who's working for different types of products or SKUs and then use that in their plans for building advertising.
And this is full connection of everything, right?
If done correct, right? I mean, there is a lot of filling in the gaps because I don't think anybody has a complete picture of the U.S. population, right? So
not if Amazon doesn't have it, right?
Right. There's always a gap. So you're always kind of modeling or licensing additional data to kind of fill those gaps. However, that said, that information is super powerful because if you understand who your loyal customers are or who is buying your competitor's product, you now have a really rich target to go after. And so what's interesting about CTV is there's multiple signals that you can use to basically find that audience, whether it's the hashed email, the physical address. We are able to use IP address very reliably, Comcast, because we're an ISP, and we have those mapped to the physical address. So what that does for you is allow you to build a target, match that target to the viewing environment. So ideally you have subscriber login, authenticated people watching TV. You can then reach them with confidence. And then on the back end, after you've run your campaign, you can then look at similar attributes, either the email from the receipt that was sent, confirming you bought something online, or the IP address, or the actual physical address because you gave them they shipped to your home. You can then match that up to the ad exposures.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought one of the issues with CTV is 90% of the purchases, if you're watching something on CTV, are still made on your phone or your desktop, right? Because no one's pretty much buying anything through the television yet.
It is still not a natural behavior for the consumer to use their remote control to type in anything on the TV, right? Unless it's autofill. And, some of the operating systems allow for that, but it's not comprehensive. So you don't know if every experience is going to be fluid and helpful in that regard. So yeah, most of it is happening second screen. And then you have this disconnect, right, between the identifier that was connected to the ad exposure and the identifier on your PC or your MacBook or your phone where you do the purchase.
And do you know if any other countries have proclivity for purchasing on the television yet?
I think the state of the state is pretty similar everywhere. Okay. Like I know, look, there's investments being made in, television commerce or, the shoppable TV. There's a bunch of different names for it.
Nothing is
but
even...
it's not scaled yet. It's not even close to scaled because it's still, like I said, it's an unnatural experience. You're in a lean back kind of entertainment mode. You don't want to, for one, interrupt that experience on the TV at that moment in time. Like maybe if it's a burning thing you really need, like you would, but generally you're like, no, I'm going to keep watching my show, pick up my phone. I mean, we all multitask anyway. It's terrible, but we do. And I'm rather use my phone or my laptop that's already here with me to make the purchase. So connecting those two experiences is really hard. And, all of the identity graphs that people are building, again, have gaps and there's error and noise.
Yeah,
and therefore
I always go back to
it's hard. It should work perfectly, but there's gaps and therefore it's not perfect. And people need to know that. And this frustrates me because this is my world. Like I sell data for a living now, and the error rates are actually extremely high and people think it's precision targeting and it's not.
I always go back to measurement and attribution is the most important piece of the technology system out there, and it's still not great across the ecosystem.
No, it's not.
And
there are a bunch of companies working really hard to solve the problem, but it's easy to be lazy, meaning you license an ID graph from one of the main graph companies, and you're like, oh, it's all deterministic data. I can match all of these IP and email addresses perfectly to a household. Unfortunately, you can't. It's not right. Like there's always the data gets stale very quickly, and unless you're constantly refreshing or have access to the truth set, you're going to get it wrong almost as much as you get it right.
Yeah.
And what's crazy about that is like we all talk about the John Wanamaker quote from like long ago.
Yeah.
And that was the problem with TV. Like you buy a demo and it's like you don't know which audience you're actually reaching because it was a panel. People complained about that. And so you were like flipping a coin even when you were buying a target. And then we moved to display and we thought, oh, it's perfect. Well, that was never perfect because of cookies and like that.
Whole different conversation, yes.
But then we have the same problem now in TV where, oh, we have logged in customers. Great. We know their email. Well, the problem is the average household has 9 email addresses. So the likelihood of the email that you logged in with being the same email that you used to make a purchase, that you have a very small shot, 1 in 10 chances of it being right.
The more we talk, the more I feel like measurement attribution just never gets solved in our lives. It might get better and closer, but you're never going to have...
I think we've made some really big strides. We work with a number of measurement companies, and they are licensing more quality data today than they were 5 years ago. And I think the practices that they're using to build their models and use fact sets to train those models is, again, better today. There's a big focus on it. It's really important because marketers they don't want to waste money, and they have this, again, belief that they can reach a target with minimal waste. Some waste is good, again, depending on the brand and the tactic, but they don't want to waste dollars just for the sake of spending money. If you're the buyer, maybe that's okay because you have a goal to hit. But on the back end, you really want to understand the performance of what's working and what's not, and that can be so telling. I mean, come back to the days of optimization that we did when we were at Tacoda, like knowing the truth about what's working and who within the kind of exposure set of households is working might tell you something new. You might have thought, oh, only my loyal customers are going to be buying it, but you might find that there's this fringe audience that you had no idea was interested in your product, and they're crushing it for you. So all of a sudden, that becomes your new target.
And it's funny. It feels like the world we're in now, it feels like everything we learned at Tacoda is coming back now to sort of help us in our careers because it feels like we're reliving that moment.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple more questions before we wrap up. 5 years, where do you think any part of the industry do you think will be? Do you want to talk about CTV? You want to talk about search? You want to talk about display? 5 years, where do you think it's going to be?
Well, there's definitely going to continue to be compression, meaning less players.
So more consolidation.
More consolidation is going to happen. I think consumer choice will continue to be a big thing where the consumer's in charge. But I'm not so sure there'll be as much content as we had.
We reached peak
I think we
content.
hit the peak. So I think there's going to be less content, more consolidation, which means, constriction on the inventory supply. So like right now, this feels like this moment of time where there's infinite supply in TV. And that was never the case before.
Infinite supply of ad impressions.
Yeah. And I think that we're in this moment of time right now where it does feel like there's a lot of supply, so the buyers are in charge. They can set the price. But I think 18, 24 months from now, some of the, we're going to feel the strike impact where not as much content is in the market. All the streamers are trying to become profitable. They're going to spend a little bit less, be more conservative with their approach. There might be consolidation, which then might limit the volume a little bit because instead of having 2 platforms, now you only have 1. So anyway, I think that will have a net positive effect ultimately on kind of the viability of, having a streaming service that is profitable. And then the other thing is I think YouTube just continues to grow.
YouTube and YouTube TV or separately?
I think that they will leverage them together as a consumer continuum, right? You enter for free, and the premium content they'll put inside of the YouTube TV tier. It's what's happening now, but I think over time maybe there'll be a more fluid experience between the two.
Yeah, I find YouTube just so compelling when you want to find something and you want that video, the explanation. It's mind-boggling how good it is.
The younger generation, they consume content far differently than we do. And I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that now, basically, because it is going to set the tone for 5 years from now.
Do you think Google, with everything that's happening with the lawsuit and search and, found it monopolistic, do you think that impacts? Would they spin off YouTube, create a separate company? Would they have to?
I mean, YouTube standalone is already bigger than my company and Disney combined.
Right, and bigger than Netflix, right?
By far. And so I think they could, and that would create a lot of shareholder value if they spun it off. But if you look at what happened with Microsoft, they did just fine. After their antitrust case, they cleaned up their act and, refocused the business, and it's fine. I think Google might be a little bit different because of where they make money, the browser war versus the, ad infrastructure dominance.
Google's just an advertising juggernaut.
Well, that's where I'm like, maybe it hurts Google a little bit more because it will be right at the heart of how they make money, which could be more damaging for them as a business. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And there's another case coming up too. So it's going to be, and that's focused on the advertising business.
Can't talk about that one yet.
No, not yet.
Okay, I have one last question before we wrap up. Seeing you in the south of France at Cannes, when you and I went to dinner together, that brought me so much joy. We had such a nice night. We didn't see each other the entire time, but we did see each other for that one dinner. And I've never gone. It was my first time going, but seeing you and just having you around there was exceptional.
It's a great experience. And, people think it's this crazy boondoggle.
It's not.
And it's a lot of work. It can be fun. Like you see old friends, meet new people, but a lot of business gets done.
I got so much work done there, learned so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Larry Allen, thank you so much. Thank you, OpenWeb, and thank you for all the listeners for tuning in. Have a good day.